Good afternoon. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. This is Wednesday, April 8th, and we're here to give you the Westchester County update on the status of our efforts to deal with the coronavirus outbreak that has affected the whole world, much less our home backyard here in Westchester County. I want to begin with a word of remembrance. We have lost many, and there's so many people, loved ones that we know, relatives of friends, those who represent you in public office. We've lost another person today, and this person was a giant in the history of Westchester government and politics. His name is Richard Bronski. Some of you may remember him. You'd have to be of a certain age to remember Richard during his years in office. He was a Greenburgh resident, and he was originally a staff person here in the Westchester County Executive's office under former County Executive Al Del Bello. And as bright as he was in that capacity, he moved on to become a county legislator, representing Greenburgh and then the river towns, and then on to almost a 30-year career in the New York State Assembly, where he was a leader of key committees and a leader in terms of legislation and in terms of initiatives that he fought for. During his time, while as an assemblyman, he twice ran for the office of county executive as a Democratic nominee. Lost both times, but had a spirited race in each time, and was both a friend as well as a combatant in his day of then County Executive Andrew O'Rourke. Richard ran for the New York State Attorney General's position and was unsuccessful, but in many ways, he's not defined by the races he won or the races he's lost, but rather the universal respect for his intelligence, the universal respect of those of us in government for his ability to foresee issues that became important long before the rest of us did, for his intellectual tenacity. No one wanted to debate Richard Bronski in the debate on the floor of the New York State Assembly, where I served with him as a colleague, or in the county legislature, because we knew that he had a razor-sharp mind and he had thought through his positions very carefully. And even when you disagreed with him, it was hard to deflect the arguments that he would raise on its behalf. In the last 10 years, he followed pursuits in academia. He was a columnist and he was a commentator on a variety of different venues. His encyclopedic knowledge of government and politics was always on display. He was a friend to me, a person I could turn to ask for advice. And even when I didn't take his advice, I always wanted to hear it because he had that type of skill and ability. There are many people that we have lost so far in Westchester and elsewhere. And we knew this early on when we saw what was happening with a worldwide pandemic and what would happen when it came here. We knew that in due time, as I've said before, this invisible force that's nowhere and everywhere at the same time would take the lives of people that we knew. It's still hard to accept when that happens. It's hard to accept when it happens in such a short period of time that a person is healthy, and then a week from that day, they're gone. And so in this season, we've talked about it before, this is tonight the first night of Passover for our Jewish brothers and sisters. We wish for them a very important, but ultimately joyous time, although it's somber as well as joyous, as people gather around for Seder meal as best as they can, given this moment that we're in of social distancing. And then beginning tomorrow, our Christian brothers and sisters will celebrate the most important religious time of the year. But it causes us to think and to understand that, yes, we in government have responsibility to do things every day secularly, but there are times when we have to think about things that are beyond our ken. And in the case of losing Richard Bronski, we have lost a tremendous public servant for our Westchester community. And we mourn him. We send to Paige, Willie's family, our great condolences. And for those of us who knew him, we will never forget him. We are at a point now where we're looking at numbers every day. We'll cover our Westchester numbers that follow the governor's announcement earlier in the day of statewide numbers. Westchester County now has 15,887 people that have tested positive for COVID-19. That is almost the exact same number now in Suffolk County and about 3,000 behind Nassau County. If you recall, when we first began this, Westchester was the leader in the state, above even New York City. And now, based on population and spread, I think we're pretty much going to wind up behind the two other major downstate suburban counties and New York City. In the overall state, 149,000 people have been identified as positive. That does not necessarily mean that that's the only people who are positive. It's really based on the testing. New York State has tested 365,000 people. Westchester County has tested just shy of 50,000 people, which is per capita the highest testing ratio in New York State. Right now, we have slightly over 1,000 people hospitalized, 1,107, and we have lost 315 Westchester residents to this disease. That compares to Suffolk County with 323 fatalities and Nassau County with 566 fatalities. Overall, statewide, we've lost 6,268 New Yorkers. Now, we've done this mathematics previously. We've used a flip chart a week ago to try to make a graphic. But today we have 15,887 total positives. I used this number yesterday, but it is actually 2 weeks ago today that the number of people that had tested positive 2 weeks ago today was 4,691. And the presumption is, and this drives the decision to release people from isolation, that if you've gone 2 weeks and you don't show symptoms of the disease and you're in a position where you can resume a normal life, which may still involve being in the house all the time, not going to work and not venturing outside of the house for anything other than essential reasons, that you're basically considered COVID-free. So if we take that 4,691 number, we subtract it from the total number of positives, 15,887, we have 11,196 active cases of COVID in Westchester County right now. We have, as I mentioned briefly, 1,107 people hospitalized, and that pretty clearly is about 10% of the total population of those who are still active with the COVID virus. Not everyone is hospitalized who suffers. And of course, some of the deaths that we have, those folks do not make it to the hospital given where they are. And the 315 deaths represent still a relatively small percentage of fatalities. The hospitalization rate at 10% continues from yesterday. That is a number that we hope to see going forward. It has been theorized that hospitalization might get as high as 20%. And it's when we reach the higher percentage of people that require hospitalization that we begin the process of overtaxing our health facilities. If we can keep it a 10% number, as we've had, recent few days, that would be a good situation. 1,107 hospitalized people, and we have in Westchester County 3,000 plus hospital rooms. So that shows that right now our inventory is still sufficient to handle the number of people who are sick. It is also true that even if we handle the number of sick people in Westchester effectively, empty hospital beds in Westchester will be used by those in need in Rockland County, in Orange County, in Putnam County, Dutchess, in the Bronx, and wherever the state health department feels that they can save a life. And that is, at the end of the day, what this is about. It's about saving lives. I had the opportunity to tour the county center today with Deputy County Executive Ken Jenkins, with our Director of Operations, Joan McDonald, our Deputy Director of Operations, Emily Saltzman, and then also with the Mayor of White Plains, Tom Roach, and his Chief, Rich Lyman, of the Fire Department. And together we got a tour. We saw the construct of the 110 beds. Some of them are in the tents that are created outside in the parking lot. The rest are inside on the main floor of the county center. And it was incredible to see. This is bottom-up building. They're not just putting pipe and drape over to divide the room. These are solid walls. These are constructed to have air and water being able to pipe into every one of these 110 rooms. It's very impressive work, engineering work and construction work to get us to this point. And we're very happy to see that now we have a confidence level that within 10 days or so, we'll have 110 additional beds in Westchester County of an appropriate level to give appropriate care on top of the 3,000 beds we already have. And each hospital is being encouraged by the state to add additional hospital beds. We have the breakdown by communities in terms of our result numbers. These numbers continue to rise. They are not correlated to the exact numbers that the state produces because of the issues that happen with the lag time and the difficulty of identifying every tested patient. But they do give some indication of what relative impact there are. In the city of Yonkers, we have, as of today, 1,913 cases. The city of New Rochelle has 870 cases. Mount Vernon has 805 cases. Town of Greenburgh has 699 cases, 368 from the unincorporated part of Greenburgh, 299 from the accumulation of the 6 villages. City of White Plains has 483 positive cases. Town of Mount Pleasant has 404 cases, which include 223 from the unincorporated portion of the town and 186 from the 2 villages, Sleepy Hollow and Pleasantville, that comprise the bulk of Mount Pleasant. And then we have the village of Portchester with 355 cases, Ossining Village with 321 cases. At the bottom rung of the ladder, Pound Ridge has 7 cases, and we're hopeful that all of these people on this list and other lists will go through the 2-week period of time, show no symptoms, and then be able to be treated as having been cured of COVID and take them out of the list that we worry about every day, which is what happens to those who are infected and what are their prognosis for health and for survival. As we mentioned yesterday, there are quite a volunteer spirit in Westchester County. We've aforementioned our efforts to try to attract nurses, doctors, healthcare technicians, respiratory therapists, and so forth, and the degree of success we've had with that. I mentioned just yesterday that we were seeking volunteers to help us from our economic development team to assist local businesses, primarily small businesses, perhaps working through local chambers of commerce or others in these communities, in order to help them apply for federal money that's available. Sometimes the application process is complicated, not easy for a person to do whose background is not in filling out those types of documents. And we have received, just in the short few days, 200 volunteers to do this function. It is a tremendously necessary function. If you are involved volunteering to help us do this, you are part of the COVID action team, because our economic development issues come right behind the healthcare issues that will take the lead. And we're very encouraged that Bridget Gibbons and her team have had the ability to attract so many people in such a short period of time. It's also important to mention that our economic development team has made an effort to survey the business community and get some information about what they're experiencing during this downturn. I'll just mention, without having the final results on all of these things, of those that have responded, which is not the full complement of everyone, 3/4 of them report that they will lose over 50% of their income due to COVID. But almost 60% of them have not yet let any of their staff go as of the date of the survey. So they're absorbing the loss by paying their staff, even as they've had a dramatic drop of income. And that's certainly in some of the businesses that have been closed by executive order, restaurants, bars, health clubs, gyms, beauty parlors, barbershops, and so forth. But it also involves those businesses that were not considered essential. And while they weren't closed as a class of business, their involvement in commerce has been reduced down to a trickle. And that certainly affects their income and the ability of them to keep people hired. Even with that, it's an impressive number in the survey. Most of them, 70% of them, believe they're going to need major assistance in changing marketing and their business model to keep customers and clients. We're going to be going through a very heavy-duty economic lift when this is over. And 85% of them directly need financial assistance. They're going to be applying for these various loans, but the application process is essential. So with those volunteers, with that effort, we are going to try in Westchester County, working through our local governments and our chambers of commerce, to be that helpful step for the local business people in order to apply for money that's available at the federal level. That includes the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. That includes the Paycheck Protection Program. There's always a name. There's always an acronym to go with each of these programs. I've crafted a few myself over the days, and we think this is going to be very important as we go forward. We constantly have to address the issue of parks being open. As it stands now, New York State has kept their parks open. Many of the municipalities have kept their parks open. Yonkers has, the city of Rye has, a number of other communities have. And of course, the county has done that as well. We do not have open any of the parks that involve large quantities of people structurally in enjoying the recreation of the sport that park provides. We have not opened up a public swimming pool. We have not opened up a public beach. We have not opened up Playland Amusement Park. We have put on hold any plans for the ethnic festivals that occur spring, summer, and fall at both Kensico Dam and at Ridge Road Park. So we clearly understand what happens when there is no social distancing and how it can spread the disease. We are having a never-ending debate because there are some people in the society that have certain beliefs. And one of the beliefs they have is that we should have a Wuhan city level shutdown. The decision for that rests with the governor of this state and the neighboring states or the president of the United States. It does not fall within the prerogative of a county executive, or for that matter, your village mayor, your town supervisor, or your city mayor to close the totality of society down. While the society is not locked down from top to bottom, we believe that appropriate recreation should be available for people. Now, that is immediately a disqualifier for some people, and I'm sorry, but I've made a decision, and so have other elected officials, based on healthcare professionals' advice. We don't make these decisions by ourselves. We talk to healthcare officials and we say, can this be left open based on how it's used? Can we leave this open based on how it's used? And they give us the advice, which informs our opinion. We know that we can't open a public swimming pool. There's no way to have social distancing at a public swimming pool. We're not stupid. We understand that. There's no way that we can allow those ethnic festivals at Kensico Dam Plaza. But that does not mean that every park should be closed. I understand people hold that opinion. It's not that we don't hear that opinion. We've heard the opinion. We've evaluated it against the facts, and we find that it is not the appropriate action to take right now, and that there are many more people from Westchester County that favor us maintaining some presence in the parks, not a universal active presence, but some level of enjoyment of the park. And the three uses that have come up most frequently are biking, hiking, walking, and golf. And in those three particular areas, you can structurally, socially distance yourself in a way that you cannot do when you're playing touch football, when you're playing rugby or soccer, if you're playing any traditional contact sport, basketball, ice hockey, the ethnic festivals, they cannot be structurally social distance. Biking, hiking, and golf can be. Now, when I have gone out over the weekend, I have toured, the last 2 weekends, I've toured county parks from stem to stern. I've been in the northern part of the county, the southern part of the county, Sound Shore, river towns, the whole place. I've looked at most all of the parks at least once. Every time I've gone there, I have yet to see a flat out example of willful a lack of social distancing that couldn't be corrected by a parks official or a police officer announcing to people, please exert social distancing. When told about it, most people respond effectively. 85% of the people respond. We have the tool to find people if we see fit, and we leave that decision to the law enforcement officials on the spot. They're professionals. They know how to handle crowd situations. They'll know what touch is the best touch in order to adjust that. Many times what will happen is a combination of people may cluster. They may cluster for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then they break off and they move in other directions. I spent an hour this weekend sitting on the boardwalk at Playland, which I've had people report were people too close together, not socially distancing, and I saw for myself the comings and the goings of people. I did not spend 24 hours a day there every day of the week. I'm here doing my job as county executive. But the reports that I have gotten back is that in the main, people are social distancing. There are times when they are not. And when those times occur, if you see it, call the county police and report it and say, I am at Ward Pound Ridge right now, and there's a combination of people. But to go onto Facebook to continue to express your anger and frustration does not help us. We are in a time where we need unity and discussion. And if your point of view isn't expressed in public policy, you need to understand why and not merely be blindly critical of it on an ongoing basis. We need, and we've been told by the mental health professionals, we need for people to have some outlet, which, if properly used, is helpful to their mental health and their willingness and ability to maintain social distances throughout the course of the day. When a decision has been made from the governor or the president to shut the society down the way Wuhan City was, that's one thing. But those who call for that, knowing they don't have the authority to impose it, are really doing a public disservice by trying to create a policy pressure that has a counter pressure, and we create conflict in the society unnecessarily. So biking, hiking, golfing are still socially distanceable functions, and they continue to be functions in the county that are appropriate. And they are appropriate in the state. And many of the local communities, not all of them, also agree and allow for that. I've tried to answer this question thoroughly. I will deal with any press inquiries about this, but I've reached a point at which I couldn't be more clear about the subjective decisions made as to what constitutes a particular recreation and what constitutes a particular sport, how they differ, and why one would be shut down and one would not. And I think I'm speaking on behalf of the majority of Westchester residents in looking for a balanced approach, not an ideological approach. And the same applies to the way we look at our business society. We know that we're going through a terrible economic crisis here. When the contagion is completed, when it's behind us, we will have a massive task to build up the business structure of our state and of our nation to be able to provide the opportunity for people to rebound from what is a terrible set of circumstances economically, and the governments are in a terrible shape. The budgets of the towns and the cities and the villages and the county and the states are all impacted by this. We've lost a tremendous amount of revenue, both now and what we project, and we are in a difficult time. But we're going to start with the difficult time experienced by individuals, solve those problems, try to put money in the hand of the individuals, and then the small businesses, and then we believe the rest of the economy will pull up as an outgrowth of that. That's the same philosophy that we use in terms of recreation. We are being pragmatic, not ideological. We have a number of different areas of public engagement online, websites, social media, since you can't enjoy all of the programs that are available. For example, there are curator videos online that will give information that are park-related activities that will not happen in the real world right now, as they would have if we didn't have the situation. There's one that you can find on the Reed Sanctuary page on the website. It has to do with beekeeping or bees. Lasden Park has a scavenger hunt. It does require a smartphone, but for kids age 5, 6, 7, that's a fun thing to do. It gives clues and you can go there. There's an instruction sheet on how to dye eggs, a naturalist story time. There's a Playland Playhouse. There's a host of these different activities. And they're particularly targeted for kids because we know that as much as they don't want to be in school, they also have to be entertained and involved every day. That's hard for parents to do with a host of issues. So we encourage you to go on our website and look for examples of that. We have a host of issues that involve the Department of Social Services, the outreach that we have to those people who are poor, those people who require assistance to survive, from the homeless, all the way through those that are regular recipients of aid to needy families. There's a host of different issues here. We worry about child protective services and adult protective services, which are part of our county mission. These are all missions that have been created by the federal government and the state government, and the county is tasked with administering them. The county is tasked with helping to structure and administer daycare programs through the schools for children of first responders so that they can have daycare services and allow mom and dad to participate as first responders. Any of these issues that involve our social services, you're welcome to give us a call. If there's an adult protective service issue, the abuse of a senior citizen or a person who's adult, 995-2259. There is a child protective service as well. I think with a child, because of the circumstances, you should dial 911 and have immediate police response. We want to make sure that you understand one of the most basic things. This comes right along the same level of wash your hands. Mom and dad said that to me, primarily mom, all those years ago. Wash your hands. Here's another practical advice. You shouldn't need a county executive to even say this. Pick up gloves and masks when they are no longer usable. Do not drop them off by the side of the road. I've seen it myself. I am amazed that people can't hold on to trash and put it in the proper receptacle. A person who's responsible for cleaning up the park comes by and sees some rubber gloves on the ground or a mask. They have to assume that that's contaminated. How are they going to pick that up and dispose of it properly? Dispose of it yourself. Take the gloves off, the mask off, and put it in the proper receptacle so it can be disposed of. Common sense and consideration for other people. Very simple stuff. We do want to put out, again, a very broad thank you to all of our first responders. And first responders includes the traditional first responders, police, firefighters, EMS workers, and we add to them healthcare workers, the nurses, the technicians, the doctors, all of those involved in that, because they are the front line of fighting this contagion. So all four of those categories represent first responders. Do something nice. We've already seen a lot of examples of that already. Put something up on your social media page to show them that you care. We have 2 hashtags established, hashtag WC Thank You and hashtag #MyWestchester. Both of those are opportunities for you to say something nice about those people that have been serving us so well. I've mentioned over the last few days, we have lowered flags to half staff on county buildings and county facilities. That is not universal, but we know that some communities are doing the same thing. We think that's the proper respect in recognition for all the people that have lost their lives through the COVID virus. And as I've said already, we want to recognize for our Jewish brothers and sisters the first night of Passover, the Seder, a blessed week of remembrance. That begins at sundown tonight. Tomorrow on Thursday, we'll have another one of these press conferences, and I'll make sure that I extend wishes to our Christian brothers and sisters as they begin the Holy Week with Holy Thursday, or Maundy Thursday, as it's known in different denominations of Christianity. Just a closing comment. We have one or more questions that we'll take to follow. We are in this for the long haul. Anybody who thought this was going to be a short sprint was mistaken. We began this process by hearing about something in a faraway land, and some of us thought it couldn't touch us, and so therefore it was something that was happening over there in that part of the world. The medical professionals, the scientific professionals told us that this would be an epidemic and a pandemic, that this world is so interconnected now by people traveling from one place to another that it was inevitable that it would find its way onto Australia, onto the South Pacific Islands, into Asia and Africa and Europe, and at varying levels, South America, North America, islands in the Caribbean. And it has. It's reached here to our shores now. What we're experiencing in the New York metropolitan area is not unique. I fear for my friends and my fellow Westchester residents that we get through this crisis, but we are not alone in that facing this crisis. And there are many parts of the United States of America that don't report that they have 15,000 positive people, but they have 15,000 positive people. They just haven't tested to find that out. We are trying to get our hospital bed capacity up to snuff so that we can handle the Westchester patients. If we can do that successfully, every open bed will be used for somebody that's in an ill situation. We are still striving every day to provide enough PPEs, personal protective equipment, for the people who need it in organized structures and for those who provide services. We are trying very hard to identify doctors and nurses to come to the fray. We hope that we will have access to sufficient ventilators as a hope to keep people alive long enough for their antibodies to successfully fight off this invasion of the COVID virus into the system. But this is not a battle that's won easily. I may have mentioned this before, but I talked to my mom, who's passed now over 20 years ago, and she was a young woman, late teenage years during World War II. And I asked her what it was like to follow every night on television what was happening on World War II. She said, George, there was no television in those days. And I kind of, was surprised. I had forgotten TV was something that was created during my lifetime. She said, you had radio and you followed it a little bit. You had newspapers that you read. And, you sort of followed it, and President Roosevelt would come on the radio and he would speak to you in his wonderful voice, and you had a sense of confidence in him. And he'd ask you to get a map out and kind of follow it on the map. And she said, I really didn't do that. She's a young girl. She wanted to have fun with her girlfriends. And when America got in the war, all the boyfriends were gone. They went off to war. But it was a long run from Pearl Harbor to VE Day and VJ Day in 1945. It was almost 4 years, 3.5 years. During the course of battle, after Pearl Harbor until Midway, we didn't know that we were going to take back the Pacific. When they were island hopping in the Pacific, from Guadalcanal, ultimately Iwo Jima to Okinawa, there were day after day reports of death, and people would come, home and see the armed services official representatives come to knock on a neighbor's door to tell them that their son had died at a distant shore and was never coming home to Harrison, where she grew up. She spoke of what it was like to go through a whole year, then another whole year, then another whole year. And this was not Christmas as she knew it as a younger girl. And, when D-Day came and the Americans landed back on the European continent, how long it took, a year, before they had beaten the Nazi war machine. And it took a lot of stamina. It took a lot of forbearance. It was not over in a day. It affected the United States economy. Now the war economy was a different situation. It actually pump-started the economy. and she went to work in a factory. She wasn't a riveter, but she went to work in a Pratt & Whitney engine factory, I think outside of Hartford, Connecticut, if I recall the story correctly. But what she emphasized to me was how long the sacrifice was. Now, we're here as intelligent people, and we recognize nothing comes easily. Nothing comes quickly. We know that. You go through 4 years of an education, you get a degree, high school degree, college degree, whatever. You enter a career with a degree in your hand, and it takes years to master elements of it. Years for you to establish a reputation that people come to believe in you, where you perform in a week, in a month, in 2 months, in a half a year, in 2 years, in 6 years, and you show your stamina by what you do day after day. That when you get a mortgage on a house, it's a 30-year commitment, not a 30-month commitment, and that every month you have the mortgage payment to make. And you don't get credit for having made 28 years of payments, and then you get to have 2 years free. You have to pay the last 2 years too. When you raise a child, that little child in your home has to be raised at the minimum till age 18, and they're your child for the rest of your life. And you'll worry about them as a grown man or as a grown woman in ways different from when they were a little baby, but you have the same thing, but it takes stamina. And when we have people tell us that right around the corner is the cure for this disease, if it does materialize and science gives us that cure, we will rejoice and we will do everything we can to save everybody in the hospital. But if that cure is not right around the corner, then it's a disservice to people to make them think it is, because we want to believe it's around the corner. But we're being sold snake oil if it isn't real. So I hold back my sense of enthusiasm. I believe that we will get through this, and we'll get through this by having stamina and resilience, not by believing that in a week or a month we're going to have the miracle cure. If it does come, then we'll rejoice. And the same is true for every one of the elements of what we're dealing with. Not only the virus, antiviral treatment, the vaccine. Hopefully we will get in-home testing for COVID, which will allow us to have everybody tested. And instead of having percentages of the population, we'll know who has it and who doesn't have it, and then treatment and behavior can follow that. All of that will be the rational workings of rational people in a very difficult time. None of us in public office could anticipate that this would happen quite this way. I don't think we were caught unawares, but once you start to deal with a host of issues, it becomes much more real than theoretical. We would have tabletop programs to plan what if this happened, what if Indian Point had a major failure of protective systems. What would we do when there's an active shooter in a public arena, in a mall, or at a sporting event? How would we handle it? And there are protocols that you work, and there are protocols in how you work in a pandemic. And then when you have hundreds of people die in a very short period of time, then you face the issue of fatality management, which means what? Which means how do you handle the fact that our system of funeral homes and burials and cremations are overtaxed, and not all of the people who have died can get the proper burial, wake that they and their families need. And you have to manage that process. And you do things like get a refrigerated vehicle to store those people. It's a horrific thing to talk about, but these are the decisions you have to make. So I think we have to understand what we're in. We have to steel ourselves for the long run. We have to remind ourselves that every day we've got to get up and do the things we have to do. You know, we wear the mask, which we never did before. This is an alien thing in our culture to do this. We have to do it. Can't leave it home. Can't forget it. Got to bring it with you. You've got to be able to go out and shop, keep your distance from other people, get the things you need, go back home, be prudent in all of your activities, get the exercise you need, find things to do that are important to do without letting depression get the best of you, without letting fear get the best of you, without looking to accuse other people for how this happened or why this didn't work. My parents' generation did not get through World War II. And I presume my great-great-grandparents did not go through the immigrant experience of leaving Europe and coming to the United States and being unwelcomed when they got here without having stamina. And as I said earlier in one of my other comments, I repeat the same comments. We're going to find out now, am I my father's son? Am I my grandfather's son? do I have, and do you have the same stamina inside that they had? And I think we do. But that's what's at test here today. And we're going to succeed. We're not going to succeed because there's a miracle out there. It's because the miracle is us. It's the faith we have, the strength we have, the willingness to go through this process soberly and intelligently and come through on the other side. And the people we lose along the way, we're going to remember and we're going to grieve, but we will go on and we will rebuild this society and we will have happy days in the future. But for right now, we have to work hard. We have to show self-discipline, and we will. We'll open it up to any questions, and then we'll let you get about the rest of your day. Catherine Chaffee, our Director of Communications, is off camera. She's receiving any questions that may come in from the press, and we're certainly willing to speak with the press outside of this venue to try to amplify any story they're working on. Catherine?
Okay, Chris Eberhardt is good with the response that you gave already on the parks. The next question is from Nikita from News 12. She says, is there a breakdown of deaths by race in the county? This is following reports in other states that the Black and Hispanic population has a higher death rate, maybe due to more dense populations or health services or even a language barrier. If it's true in Westchester, what is the county planning on doing to be proactive about the situation?
Well, the question goes to the breakdown of the deaths that we have. Our statistical information at the county level of government, at the town and the city and the village level of government is limited by those statistics which New York State shares with us. You can go on to the New York State Health Department website. They have a tracker, a COVID tracker, which will give you the breakdown that the state provides of different information. That is the sum total of the information that we have to work off of. Literally, before I go before the cameras to read off these numbers, I check that tracker to see what it is that the state is enumerating. They have broken down by male, female. They've broken down by comorbidity, meaning underlying health issues that were there. So for the sake of this question, we would need the state to give us the demographic breakdown so that we could look at ethnicity or any other criteria by which we could discuss it. However, empirically, we know by looking at the numbers that the larger population communities in Westchester County are the communities that have a higher minority population. And they are where we have more cases by far. Yonkers, New Rochelle, Mount Vernon, Greenburgh, and White Plains all have high populations of Hispanic, African American, other quote unquote minority groups. And we know that in those communities that are smaller, that we have that same situation in Ossining Village and Portchester and a few other places. The question is perhaps in part demographic, but in part housing stock, because in those communities, certain villages, Sleepy Hollow would join that group, as well as the major cities or sections of the towns like Greenburgh and the Fairview section, we have concentration of population. And we know that virus spreads more thoroughly where you have people living in close quarters. The more multifamily housing you have, the more likely it is that the contagion will spread. The more you have 1, 2, 3, 4 acre properties, the less likely it is to spread. And when we look at Pound Ridge and North Salem, Lewisboro, and parts of the county that are much less densely populated, and they tend to be communities with a far less population of African Americans, Latinos, and other such groups, that it's pretty sure that we're seeing a higher concentration in those communities. I think the important thing that we can do from a county and local government is to enforce social distancing. We have to make sure people understand that whether by dint of living close together, you're accustomed to being in close quarters, you're accustomed to being in an urban setting, a playground or a vest pocket park where people hang out. It's not their way to stay in a 3 or 4 room apartment all day long. Obviously, if you have a beautiful home in a wealthy part of town, if you're in a beautiful estate in parts of the county, it is much easier to be sequestered in your house if you have a big house. And if you have a small apartment and maybe one that's not well appointed, it's much less likely. But that interaction in public, that lack of social distancing is a great concern, and that advances the spread. And that probably is the single biggest thing that we have to do, the county and the local governments together, through our police functioning. We've had a lot about the parks. What about the parks? I'm far more concerned about the urban streets in our county. I grew up in a neighborhood like that and lived in the city of Mount Vernon, very urban, most densely populated community in the county. And I lived in that community for the first 25 years of my life. And I know what it is like to be in environments where you walk out the front door and people are up and down the street and you're interacting with people all the time. And that doesn't necessarily happen to the same degree in the more rural parts of this county, nor in the more rural parts of the country. So when people tell me, well, the parks are the place, stop. I'm looking at a high percentage of cases in the urban centers of the county, which are nowhere near Ward Pound Ridge, and for which the contagion is moving much faster, and for which everyday living puts you in close quarters with people. So that is what we have to address, and that is much harder to do. You can close down a park at some point in time, but you can't close down the streets of different sections of these communities. And the closeness by which people live together in apartment complexes, when they go outside the apartment complex to catch any kind of air, they're in each other's close quarters. That is the challenge we have. I think that's the most singular effort that us local governments can do to address the issue.
That's the only question we have.
Well, we have no other questions. And again, you've been very gracious to let me into your world, into your computer. We had online earlier today an interview with Mike Spano, the mayor of Yonkers. We try to have a Facebook interview each day with someone that's involved in this issue. We will not be having this. We will do this update tomorrow on Thursday. We will not have this update on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We'll come back on board on Monday and report. If we do have anything urgent to report, we will do that. And we'll make sure that our friends in the media are well aware of it. But at this stage of the game, in deference to the religious holidays, we'll do a press conference tomorrow at 2 o'clock again. And then hopefully we'll have a good weekend that will give us some opportunity to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But until we actually see the light at the end of the tunnel, we will hope that it occurs rather than predict that it will. Have a good day. Thank you for your time. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. Be safe.